Okay, I'm doing another horizontal painting to match the last one. And for some background on the topic of this painting, it's based on a particular song I listened to a lot as a kid. I've always loved the idea of playing music, but ever since I was a little kid trying to play the recorder in my third grade music class, I've always sucked at trying to play any kind of instrument or music. And I still can't read sheet music or notes, which is funny because I actually took a music class in high school and only just barely passed. Because I would just memorize the order of the keyboard keys for whatever song I was meant to learn. I couldn't actually read the music, and I still can't. In contrast to me, my brother has always been good at this kind of stuff, and has also always at least had some kind of interest in instruments and music. Starting with an electric keyboard from my grandma when he was a little kid, and moving to a woodwind instrument while in his junior high band, to playing the electric guitar on his own in high school. Also, side note, but this part of the painting reminds me of the Windows XP background. Anyways, all of our friends from when we were around that age were band kids, and being twins and the same age and grade, our friend groups ended up overlapping, although they always seemed more like his friends than my own. I always felt like a third wheel, although it was a big friend group, so more like an eighth wheel. Less of a tricycle-sized group and more of a semi-truck. But it wasn't because they were mean. I remember being, and still am, grateful for them taking me in, even though I never really did fit in with their personalities or sense of humor. And as a result, I never really felt isolated or like I needed to look for friends. But at the same time, I always felt different and distant from them, and definitely felt like I was the weakest link, and still somehow felt lonely even though I was surrounded by people. But again, they were very sweet people. They never made me feel unwanted. That was more in my own head. Sorry about the rant, I just haven't reflected on those feelings since I graduated high school. But yeah, I never really fit into that crowd. But apparently after the legendary yet older band teacher retired, a lot of people left the band. Or at least that's what I heard from the ex and still current band members. Which was sad because I remember when that teacher was there, it being a pretty reputable high school band. I went to one or two of their performances to watch my brother and his friends, usually always being dragged out and forced to go, since even as a junior high student, I hated the large crowds. And all of the loud music, and having to sit still in the dark next to a bunch of other people. And back then, and even now, I would prefer a quiet, cozy night in my own house. And in the band, my brother played the clarinet like a certain cephalopod, which I remember he was always teased about as soon as he mentioned what he played. But even after he left the band, I remember he still learned and played new songs on his electric guitar, I think all the way until he moved out at 21. And I remember vividly being woken up at like 2 a.m. to him shredding on his guitar, sometimes literally hooked up to an amp in the middle of the night. He had like the opposite sleep schedule of me, and went to bed at 3 in the morning while I woke up at 3. So sometimes I would be up by then. And I used to sleep with headphones on, so I don't remember being super annoyed or anything. I remember I would get home from school and just be so exhausted and my social battery so drained, I would just go to bed. But that meant the only free time I had was in the mornings, so I just started getting up at more and more ungodly hours of the night. But anyway, I think part of what started his later interest in rock and guitars was that as a child my brother was obsessed with Guitar Hero on the Wii. I think the third one specifically. And I think he ended up beating it in like every difficulty. As a little kid, I remember him coming and getting me to show me whenever he beat a new boss level song. The two that I remember him being most excited for was The Devil Went Down to Georgia, and I think even harder was Through the Fire and the Flames. I remember for the former, the game literally had you guitar fighting the devil. And after, I think you unlocked the literal devil as a playable character. The game had some pretty bad graphics, except for the opening sequence, which was animated in 2D and pretty cool. But despite the clunky graphics, it had such a unique, grungy, retro style to it that it ends up having tons of personality. And some of the sound effects I still remember very vividly to this day. Anyways, I remember my brother excitedly trying to teach me how to play, but since I have the most awful hand-eye coordination, I struggled so bad trying to push all the right colored buttons in exact time to match the music. It took such a level of multitasking and thought that when I tried for the first time, it fried my poor child brain. But he was a pro at it. So much so that when one of our classes made us bring in something we were proud to show off and do a presentation on, I did a little dragon shoebox diorama, and my brother showed off his Guitar Hero skills. I remember people actually finding it pretty impressive, and I always did too. His fingers move super fast, and it actually looks pretty intense. Here's a video when he was like 17 or 18, and apparently this was his first attempt at this particular song. And he got an 85%, like there was no way I'd get past the first few seconds. And it's like an 8-minute song, and he was specifically trying to not pause once. I would have to look down at the keys, then back up to the screen, and by then I would have missed the time I was supposed to play. Or at least that's always how it went when I tried. But like how people who aren't artists can find a painting pretty, people who are awful at playing music can enjoy a good tune. and I ended up really liking some of the songs he showed me. This being one of my favorite, although I always felt awkward saying it was, since my family is and has always been very religious. And saying I like the Devil song always felt a little taboo. But not to get too serious, but I think it's important to know where to separate intention from the symbolism. Yes, it's technically the devil, but the intention of the song isn't to praise the devil. To me, it's more like a folk song just trying to tell a story, but I actually remember this kind of thing coming up a few times. Since my brother was a fan of the same heavy metal bands usually targeted by churches for being of demonic influence, but I feel like that made me learn the difference between the demonic symbolism being used to tell a story versus it actually glorifying the devil. Since after all, the devil and demons have always made their way into art and folklore, and were always used to tell stories. And I think when people hyperfixate on trying to find the devil in the details, it only serves to distract people from the actual evils and issues around us. And speaking of, I had to make a decision on how to depict my version of the devil, since sometimes he's shown as a charmer persuading people to make deals, and other times it's a grotesque abomination reflecting the monstrous evil of a demon. And I ended up choosing neither, since I'm sort of bad with people and I already have to do one of those already. And I don't want to make it too freaky because then it's kind of ugly for a wall decoration. So he ends up almost being a deceptively cute little goat. And I figured out why I decided this design. Because I think subconsciously I was thinking of the Jersey Devil, since they both have devil in the name. And full disclaimer, I have no idea all the little parts that make up a violin, so I just kind of made a vaguely violin-shaped blob best I could. In the song they call it a fiddle, but that's just country talk for a violin. But like I've said, I've never been good with straight lines or small little parts. And speaking of, would you look at that? More straight lines and things I'm bad at. In the form of this fence, this house, and this chicken coop. I've always sucked at houses. The way I draw them looks like the way kindergartners would, with the 2 windows, the 1 door, and the triangle roof. But that's the best detailing I could do for something so tiny, and for something that has so many straight lines. Also, I've noticed I've not done many paintings with green as the main focus. I've done 2 where it's sort of a background color, but it's definitely the color I've used the least. So I want to do this one as a mostly green landscape. So I'm planning to do a very lush, peaceful farm. Since as a kid, the lyrics of the song made me picture a scene where the story actually takes place. And for me, that was the devil coming to a little piece of heaven on earth, and contrasting the vibes completely. Also, the lyric, chicken in the pig pen picking out dough, made little sense to me at the time, and I still don't know what it's supposed to mean. But for the purposes of this painting, I'm using it to justify me adding little chickens, since I like chickens. And I want to add some animals where I can. Since again, I'm not the best with people, so I might as well have something I like painting in here. Same with the lyric, Granny, does your dog bite? And for the dog, I went with a sort of livestock guardian style dog. I want to say a Maremma? Whatever are those fluffy white dogs that helped with the little blue penguin conservation. Because I remember hearing a story of some that were usually trained to guard chickens, being used to actually help ward off foxes that had been decimating the little blue penguin population in Australia. Since foxes aren't native, same with rabbits and plenty of other animals. Since if I remember correctly, European settlers let loose all kinds of little critters, so that they could keep up the same types of hunts they had for sport back home. So that's how foxes got there in the first place, and normal fox hunting sucks, let alone destroying an entire untouched ecosystem just to have more fox hunting. I was gonna make the dog growling at the devil, but just preferred the quiet, quaint, peaceful vibes. Which may be strange for a song like this, but it's the picture I always got imagining the scene as a kid. That the devil was the only thing off, and this otherwise tranquil little farm he ended up crashing. I also think I'm going to add some peaches to one of the trees, since I think Georgia is known for its peaches. And I think that Florida is oranges and Georgia is peaches. I should mention now that I struggle drawing people. Painting is a whole other can of worms. And I'm just hoping I like it enough that I don't cringe every time I look at my wall. I've always struggled with painting in particular. I'm better at digital art and sculpting and drawing, but it's the thing I need to practice most since it is the thing I'm worst at. And this guy is looking less like a country farmer playing the fiddle and more like,
because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you.
Oh god, and now that I've thought of that, the dang devil, Dementor of the damned, looks like a dang Labubu. I was trying to go for a more cartoon goat demon vibe. But hey, what's more horrifying than the overconsumerism that they represent? So it almost sort of works in a way. Okay, well, it certainly has its flaws, and it definitely isn't my favorite. But something I keep telling myself while doing these is that 1, I need the practice if I ever want to actually get better, and 2, By doing subpar versions of these paintings, it gives me a chance to redo and visit them later to directly compare my improvement over time. Or at least I can only hope that I improve over time. But yeah, I feel like this painting at least complements the vibe of the last one, since they both loosely have to do with country farms. Sort of. Okay, with context they do. This one is a bit more plain and less colorful, but I think I still like it. I think.